Around the clock, sports all the time. That's never going to work. That's ridiculous.
Just remember to have fun out there today. And if you lose, I'll kill you.
This is Tall Can Audio.
Seriously, this thing is going to be a cultural disaster.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome inside a brand new edition of the Tall Can Audio podcast as we wind down that first short, but still kind of long week at the end of the summer after Labor Day. Everybody's back to work, back to school, and now a weekend in view. Matt Robinson along with you in the TCA studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada, as the Blue Jays stare down a massive weekend with the New York Yankees. The Yankees just right there, just still in reach of the division, of the top of the league. It's going to be like this all the way through the rest of September as the Blue Jays try and fight off the Astros, the Tigers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. All of these teams you're going to be scoreboard watching for the rest of the month. Our buddy Andrew Stoeten from the batflip.ca and the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast is here today to help me, take a look at where things are at, what's real, what's not real, which problems are going to last, which problems might go away. We'll get into all of it. If you missed it yesterday, on Thursday's edition of the show, I dove into the idea, the thing that I had initially talked about on August 15th, that the Ottawa Senators play-by-play team, at least as far as the radio goes, was not going to travel this year. That was confirmed on Wednesday by Graham Nichols in the Hockey News. But we had talked about that several weeks ago, and once Nichols was able to confirm it, I circled back and talked a little bit about that. Plus, Bell Media, they're calling it expanding, but it's clearly curtailing Overdrive, which is their number one. It's TSN 1050 in Toronto, but they run that shit nationwide. They have cut it back, and they're trying to present it a little differently. We got into all of that on Thursday, and if you circle back just a little further on Tuesday, lots of thoughts about the beginning of the NFL season. Connor McDavid remaining unsigned. Mitch Marner still firing off from the hip. Lots to talk about there as well. As I sit here and record this intro, I don't know what's happened between the Eagles and the Cowboys here on Thursday night as the NFL season gets started, but we're underway. It is football season, and lots going on around the show. Rob will be back on Monday, and in the coming weeks, you're going to get a lot more on the NHL. We got a couple guests lined up that way. And Dan Schulman in 2 weeks, it appears, will be back on the podcast. Lots of good stuff to come as September rolls on and we ramp things back up here on the show. But all of that is a little bit down the road. For now, we get to our conversation with Andrew Stoeten from the batflip.ca and the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast. With all of that said, we dive right into it. We bring in our buddy Andrew Stoeten from the batflip.ca and the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast just ahead of a huge series with the New York Yankees. We've said that before this season, and it's always gone well, but now it kind of feels like the pressure's on. We're getting a little jumpy about it, but I don't know. We'll see if Stoeten can boost our confidence a little bit here. How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going better than the Blue Jays bullpen. So, I hope that's everybody's case right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a low bar to clear right now. I look at it as you and I sit here. It is Thursday. This episode is going to drop on Friday morning, just for the sake of the good listener, if I make the usual mistakes of talking about last night and tomorrow and things like that. But for the sake of context, the Blue Jays just finished scoring 29 runs in 3 games against the Cincinnati Reds. And typically you would walk away with that with high knees and clapping and feeling good about things. And yet I feel like I don't really want to talk about the number of runs they gave up because it wasn't as dominant as that offensive stat would suggest. But they do come away with another series win. And I suppose at this time of year, that's all that matters. Can we sort of, just in a general zoomed out sense, before I kind of ask you to solve all my problems for me here, talk about what has happened to this pitching staff? Because it sort of feels like a season's worth or a half season's worth of everyone's slump has arrived at once. Is it more complicated than that? Is it a combination of bad luck? Is it like there's obviously, like, it's not like the whole bullpen went to the same sushi bar and it went poorly for the next few days and they were all under the weather. There's clearly a problem across the pitching staff, but it's not universal. Like, what has happened here in your mind?
Yeah, I don't think it's just one thing. I don't think it's which I think makes it less concerning than maybe others do. I mean, there's still some levers to pull, of course, in terms of like moving guys up and down. But yeah, you go case by case. Maybe Jeff Hoffman's overworked. Brendan Little, guys have kind of just stopped swinging at him. You can go down the list, and I think there are different things. And it's the starting pitchers are having their own problems as well. The home runs have absolutely been killing them. But I do think it's more of, partly it's the grind, partly it's just these other factors of, just needing a bunch of people needing to make adjustments, back as the league has sort of caught up with them a little bit. And it's something I think that they're just going to have to grind out for the most part, which, we're seeing some signs of. Louis Varland has such a great season, then you kind of look at him and you're like, that fastball does seem kind of straight, doesn't it? Even though it's 100. But there are ways for these guys to have success that we've seen in the past, and I think it's it's important to keep that in mind. It's important to keep some of the bigger picture stuff in mind, and fans have this tendency, understandably so, to especially I think when it comes to bullpens, to not really. To not understand what happens in every team's bullpen. Like just before we went on, I saw a tweet about like the number of bullpen meltdowns per team. And a lot of people, I think, would believe that the Blue Jays would be extremely high in that category. And they are, in fact, they're more middle of the pack, but I think they're towards the lower end of the middle of the pack.
Right.
They, a lot of teams experience stuff like this. A lot of relievers experience stuff like this. They are collectively going through it. Absolutely. But,
baseball is one of those sports, right? Being every day, like, the NFL, they play once a week. And so if somebody's got a bad defense, there's a good chance we all saw it at some point on Sunday, right? Because there's so few games, and you get a chance to appreciate, okay, my team is sort of more middle of the pack in this. I don't have time to watch every Red Sox and Yankees and Astros and Viking Twins, or this year there's no reason to watch the Twins, the Mariners, whatever else might be going on. I'm too busy watching my own team day to day. So you do sort of fall down the well of being, holy crap, our bullpen is falling apart over and over. And it is, but, when you look at some of the big name closers and relievers that got traded at the deadline this year, there's a few of them that are really not adjusting well. That kind of would put it more in perspective, but I don't have time to zoom out like that, right?
But I mean, I would have, on Wednesday night, I might have made time. If I were you, to watch the Yankees bullpen.
I did end up seeing
delightful.
That, the eighth inning, and there's something about, like, that was the thing walking out of the deadline with the Yankees was, holy shit, look at the bullpen those guys have built, and it has repeatedly melted down. I think you retweeted it. There was they had become the first team in however long to have one inning where they wild pitched in a walk or a run, walked in a run, and balked in a run. And I
think since like 2004,
right?
Since
and
the
it was
Yankees
also
themselves did it, yeah. And I mean, the Mariners bullpen is going worse than the Blue Jays. None of this makes any of what the Blue Jays are doing better, and obviously, guys have to pitch better. But I think it is important context when you're trying to wrap your mind around just the fact that this is stuff that happens, and that it's it was never going to be a cakewalk here. And I think a lot of people, just the way that it was such a serendipitous season, and the way that it was just against all odds, and they really, after they hit the gas beyond the Yankee series and whatever it was, June or whatever, they had this cushion. They went from this 8-game deficit to this real cushion that they're still riding, but it does seem to be dwindling, and that's been an important and an impressive thing, I think, as well. Their August, everybody thought was terrible. They were above 500. That's a pretty decent month, really, when you look at it in context. They're not gaining nearly as much ground as it maybe has felt. You do hate to be in this you bring up the Yankee series coming up, obviously you would prefer to not be in a situation where you get swept by one of these teams that's trailing you and suddenly you're not in first place anymore. But there's a chance that that's a thing that's going to happen. That's going to be the fun part of it, which is it's
your mission of settling me down here. Off to a rough start.
Well, it's just that's how it's going to be. That's what the sport of baseball really is, right? I mean, you can't expect to just waltz through September and not have these, heart and throat moments. Like, that's just, get used to it, get ready for it. And you would like to trust your relievers and your starters and everybody else who isn't George Springer, like a little bit more than the current level that it is. But I do think some people have trouble, not looking at like the very most recent performance and thinking, okay, well, this guy's really bad, and then when they go well for a bit, it's like, oh, he's good, and it's just the way that a season plays out doesn't really happen. The needle doesn't move that rapidly. You have to kind of zoom out a bit, and I think with a lot of these guys that they have, and it's like I say, they have Braden Fisher in the minors, they have Trey Savage, who's looking more and more like a guy who could be a real option. Yeah. Maybe Tommy Nance needs to have some a little more faith in him. He's pitched really well, even though the stuff and everything about him is not super impressive. But there are levers to pull that should, help them figure it out. And that's sort of the thing with bullpens, and, people get really hung up on like opening day roster stuff. And it's like, it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, no, it's all going to change, and it's all, everything's going to shift based on, performance. And sometimes that does take time, especially because, there are relationships there, and there's a bit of people managing that has to be done. I saw people complaining about Louis Varland coming in on Wednesday night because he had a successful inning, I think is probably what happened. He didn't need to pitch on a back-to-back necessarily, but you think, okay, from the manager's perspective, maybe you'd like him to go back out there, get another shot of confidence, make him feel as good as possible going into the Yankees series.
Hoffman's the one, because we've seen it now twice in a week, and I get it, like, the Jays need Jeff Hoffman, and I'm not one of those people who is saying throw him overboard and whatever else, but last night, Thursday night, see, there we go already, it's Wednesday night, that Jeff Hoffman, it wasn't a save situation, and that became 4 times in 5 nights when he's already struggling, and now you've sort of sent him out there possibly fatigued. There is an off day to factor in, but if the Jays find themselves in a save situation on Friday night against the Yankees, maybe it would have been nice if he had the 2 days off as opposed to just the 1. I like the idea that if you are convinced this is your guy, you keep going back to him. But to me, Wednesday night was a situation where you didn't have to do it, and he'd been ridden hard for the last little while. And this wasn't the first time. I'm struggling to remember now. It was within the last week or two where it was also not a save situation, and he was coming off a save, and you were like, okay, I get it. Like, get him in a rhythm. But that was one of those moments where I think you could have chosen to let him rest and build back his confidence a bit that way going into the Yankees. Now, it all worked out, but I don't know, man. There's just a couple of... I'm not as hard on Schneider as a lot of people, but there's been a couple of moments where you're like, I don't know if I'd have done that, right? And that's going to happen any baseball season. It's all subjective, but...
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, too. Yeah, people get a lot, especially... It's funny... John Schneider seems to get a lot more hate when the team isn't going quite as well as that's weird. It is. It's odd. Like, his decisions seem to have gotten worse, according to a lot of people. Where it's like, I don't know. I don't think he's fundamentally a different guy. I mean, you see those decisions individually, and absolutely, there's ways to question it. But I've come to a point in my baseball fandom where it's like, but there are arguments that are fairly equal both ways. I think most times, I didn't like the decision to take Tommy Nance out and to put in Ryan Baraki,
right?
Because that was so.
And yet, in the
Baraki's
moment,
just gotten killed by right-handers this year, and it's like he needs to get this lefty out, or you're in trouble because of the 3-batter rule, and that's exactly what ended up happening. And Nance is not. And in that really moment,
I was willing to go with Shulman and Buck, who sort of said, you know what, you're going into Yankee Stadium. This is why he's up. They have a lot of lefties. Obviously, you would want to get him a little. And I was like, yeah, all right, I could see that. And you've overcome the 5-run deficit, and you've built the big. And it did not go well. And so it does become easy to then, and I'm not suggesting you are doing it in hindsight. I sort of went with the broadcasters and went, yeah, that makes some sense to me. And when it went poorly, I was like, those idiots, right?
And there's all sorts of stuff going on, I think, under the hood and that we don't see and don't know about these decisions, which is, I don't like the appeal to authority kind of thing, because obviously we can question a manager's decisions. That's part of the fun of all of this as well.
Sure.
But, I mean, part of it I think is probably like, okay, you got to throw him in there, and like, is he going to be around for the rest of the Yankees series?
Right.
Like, he's not a guy who has a real tight grip on a roster spot.
Nope.
I don't think Dylan Tate is, even though he's pitched well, and there's going to be some shuffling still, I think, for sure. But like, if Baraki can't do that job, which is his one job, and if he does not show any improvement against right-handers, that's just going to make an easier decision to cut bait with him if that's what eventually has to happen. Or maybe if he showed better, you give him a little bit more rope. That's kind of the situation that they're in right now, because they do have so many guys.
I was like, I kind of get it. Like, let's see if he can help you get through a week or so here. And you are waiting on the 15 days to go by for a couple of other options to become available.
Yeah, Fisher's pitched really well, and he's, I think, just today, so he should be available for the Yankees series. I would expect them to call him up.
I would as well. So
because he was so good.
So before we dive in too deep on any one more piece here, one more kind of zoomed out look at this, and I don't know if you would have caught it or not, but on this week's edition of At the Letters, Arden and Ben were talking about the season at large, and you've sort of alluded to it here already as well, that the fact that the Jays are, I don't want to say this in the wrong way, but coasting on a 53-game span where they were incredible. And it comes on the heels of Arden was outlining that the season can thus far be sort of broken down into thirds. The first third, they finished, 2 games under 500. They were hanging around. It was a tough start to the season. Everybody knew that going in. In the next third, they were elite leading up to the All-Star break, coming out of it. Like, people forget that run they had coming out of the All-Star break with the Tigers, and they were unreal. August, at the end of the day, you still ended up finishing above 500, but it's been a bit of a struggle since then, and some of the other statistics throughout that month were catching up to you a little bit, and now we've got less than a month to go. When you look at this team, and I have referenced, I think you wrote it in one of your Stray Thoughts pieces and mentioned it on the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast. It sounds obvious, but it's important to remember you don't have to give those wins back, the ones in those second third of the season. Is this a team that is sort of, I've always thought, or I thought coming into this season, this was a team that would sort of hang around the playoff race, maybe squeak in, maybe not. But they weren't as bad as some people thought they were. And yet, are they that team that got really hot for a little while and are still like a reasonably good team that are riding that hot streak? Or are they better than that? It's not just that middle third that is floating the season, and maybe I'm underappreciating them a bit.
I would probably say the latter, to be honest. I mean, I think that they, that you could point to a bunch of games in the first third where they should have had better outcomes. I mean, I think, yes, they're grinding now, but we're seeing, I think the offense is pretty real. Like, that's been pretty durable, even beyond that period that you talk about and what's been going on lately with them. Over the weekend, right before the Reds series, everyone was complaining about the bullpen and the whatever. Score a run, and this won't matter so much, right? Exactly. And it's just again, I think about zooming out, right? Like, we were just talking about Braden Fisher. He's been down 15 days. 15 days ago, we looked at the bullpen and we thought, well, yeah, he's had a couple bad ones. Everybody's going well. This, they can handle his departure. And it's all changed in that short of a span. And it can all change the other way in just as short of a span, I think. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, teams will have ups and downs, and they'll never quite be as good as they look at their best or as bad as they look at their worst. So the truth is in the middle, absolutely. But I reject the notion that it's just, it's a team that had a hot streak and is mediocre otherwise. Because I think there's more talent here. I think that, they've really seen from, you just see enough guys beating their projections.
They have 9 guys over 105 WRC plus right now. It's incredible, man.
It is. It's been a great season. No matter how this next month or hopefully 2 months goes. It's been tremendously fun, and I personally, and people can think about it however they like, but I am doing my best not to lose sight of that. Much like Jeff Hoffman is doing his best not to lose velocity on his fastball, but the two lowest months of his season have been August, and now September numbers are not looking as hot either. Because it is a grind, and guys are getting worn down, and I completely understand all of the concerns that people have. It's just, for me, that's just how it is. That's the sport.
As you said, like a quick look at the Yankees finish on Wednesday, and by the time people hear this, who knows what's happened in that final Yankees-Astros game on Thursday. But that Wednesday bullpen meltdown was the latest of several, right? And you're right, that was refreshing, not just because I got to watch the Yankees lose, which is always fun, but
yes,
just in a sense that, like, okay, like, this can happen to other teams too, right? Like, even the evil empire right now is having some ungodly bad luck at times, right? And they're supposed to be the team with the easiest schedule left. Now, they are in the midst of, I heard Michael Kay call it the gauntlet, 4 straight series against playoff teams before they coast home, I guess. We'll see what that looks like. You mentioned the name a little while ago, Trey Savage. And I'm intrigued by that for any number of reasons, like most fans are. On Tuesday, or he came out of the bullpen on the same day as the Barrios start. I guess it was Tuesday. Yeah. He came out of the pen, which he had done once before this season, I believe, while he was still in Double-A. So obviously the Blue Jays are exploring this possibility, or at least keeping the possibility open that we want to keep you sort of stretched out as a starter, but mentally we'd like to give you some opportunities to be ready for the idea of coming out of the bullpen. And I think that made sense. I think a lot of Blue Jays fans understand that it's sort of 50-50. It's taken this guy a start or two every time he's moved up a level, and then he's sort of figured it out and he's got it going. And I think he's on the radar as we move down the stretch here. But I suddenly saw a lot of people making the connection that he came out of the bullpen, yes, but he's on the same rotation timeline as Barrios, who has horribly struggled lately. Do you read anything into that, or was that just coincidence, the timing of it?
I tend to think it's more coincidence, or maybe it's that they would be like, okay, this will be a time where we might need a guy to give us some length, and that'll be a good way to get his feet wet. I don't, Barrios had a good one before. It has been a struggle, definitely, the last couple of months. He had a decent one in his previous start to the one in the Red Series. But yeah, I don't see that. But also, I didn't even see him being on the radar, a month ago. Really, right. I think Nick and I have talked about this for a while, and episode to episode, week to week, it's like our odds of actually seeing him in the big leagues, in our own minds, keeps creeping up, and especially with what's happening with the bullpen. I don't see him getting a big league start. I don't see that as a realistic option. I mean, I think they're managing his innings pretty tightly. I just think it is exactly what you say, that they do want him to get some a chance to get a bit of the feel for coming out of the bullpen, and not necessarily.
You don't see him getting a start. Do you see him appearing for the Jays this year?
Starting to feel more like it might happen. Yeah. I mean, and this is something Nick and I talk about a bunch. Like, you think back to, they've done stuff like this before. Nate Pearson in 2020, like they went in that playoffs, and he was a guy who kind of had the same role where it was. Nate Pearson, Louis Varland. I don't know why I'm thinking of the two at the same time, but. But where it was like a prospect, where the innings were being managed, where that 2020, obviously that season was a bit odd,
sure,
understatement there, but I think it's like a similar concept, and you even go back to the way they used Aaron Sanchez earlier, in the tenure of Shapiro and Atkins, or even in prior to them. I think that is on the table. I mean, because I think you just have to go in and look at like who are your guys who can best get out in the playoffs, and I think Savage could certainly leapfrog Barrios, even though that's a tough one, internally, just because of how much Barrios means to the clubhouse and how he's the guy who's going to be here for a while. That's going to be a tricky question. I think he's going to get a lot of rope in that sense, and I think getting a little bit of rest is probably good for him. But there's also the whole he's La Maquina, right? He's
Sure.
that's his brand, and that's going to be. That's always tough stuff when it gets down to it. When
Do you buy anything into the idea that his struggle in the last start was based on the stretched out, like we're going to try the 6-man thing, and there's off days, and guys are getting really long breaks, and now they've obviously pumped the brakes on that and gone back to the 5-man rotation. Do you think it was, damaging to him as a guy who doesn't take days off, always takes the ball, makes the start, and, not necessarily damaging to him and his reputation that he missed a start, but do you think that had anything to do with his poor performance, was the extra days off?
Yeah, I tend to not think that should be a factor, but I also, you listen to any starting pitcher and they're very routine oriented and very focused on that, and don't like having their routines messed with. And I do think that can affect them to an extent. I don't think it should, but we do see examples of that all the time. Right? Sure. So I don't want to downplay the possibility there, but also I'm fully on board with the idea that maybe he's not. Backing him off a bit is a good idea, because it just has been so rough lately.
That said, I thought maybe the extra couple days might have helped, right?
Yeah.
But it apparently did not.
We kind of saw that with the Eric Lauer situation too, right? Like he was.
So with hindsight, the benefit of was it a mistake to go to to try and bring Lauer back in and do the 6-man, or was it worth a shot?
I mean, I thought Lauer should have been the long man, basically, from the start. I didn't care for that, but I mean, like I was saying before, with all the bullpen stuff, like I think it's there are good reasons to do it, and there are good reasons to not do it, and you just sort of have to pick your poison there, and you're going to wear it if you get it wrong,
Sure.
and you're going to look like a genius if you get it right. So I mean, I was not super for that. I thought. Lauer just makes a ton of sense as the long man when you have all these right-handed starters. He can come in and give you length, and now a lineup set up to face a righty is having to face a lefty. That's kind of an ideal situation. It did feel unjust to him because he'd pitched so well, but I understand. The people are very quick to hand wave like, oh, the locker room politics kind of stuff. Understandably so, but I think that is a real element of it, and you don't want to upset anybody.
Even if fans turn their nose up, it matters in the room, like it matters. In the clubhouse.
I think it does. I think, and you don't want guys upset about what your decisions are if they do feel like super unjust. And I think Lauer, though he's not of the stature of anybody else in the rotation at this point, I think he. You can see him talking to all these guys during games. He's really a cerebral kind of pitcher, and a guy who. You'll see him sitting talking to Scherzer and Bassett, and I think that those guys would, even though everybody's a professional and understands it all has to be based on merit and based on the team has to see where this is going. I think it's so tough to say to somebody like you've done great, but we think that this is going to all fall apart. So I can't kill them for that decision either personally. It is unfortunate sort of how it worked out, and maybe had they been keeping guys more on turn, it would have been it would have worked out better in terms of the way they've performed lately. But also you see stuff where like Gausman with a little extra rest does help, and the numbers do kind of go up and down depending on the individual. So it's been a tough thing to manage. I think I don't envy anybody having to make those decisions. But it does feel like they're sort of sorting it out, and I think the bullpen will do a similar thing where it'll sort itself out. And all I gotta do is just keep the ball in the air. And that's sort of a fluky thing sometimes. Not always, No. Max Scherzer terrifies me a little bit, just with the number of fly balls he gives up, even though that might not be the first name that one would put out. Jeff Hoffman with the velocity down is a problem. But I do think these things sort out, and it's just I think
Yariel with the gradually and then not so gradual decline in.
There's a guy who, I could see him getting a. I mean,
he needs a sore neck for a week or two.
I think that I would have said that a week ago. Yeah, but you think about the sport as a whole, and you think about some of the playoff narratives that develop over the years, like David Price and Clayton Kershaw can't pitch in the playoffs, or Judge isn't great in the playoffs, or and it's just like, well, it's. That kind of thing to me hammers home that you can't really, like, we all know you can't look at tiny samples and really make too much of them. There can be all sorts of factors that go in, and there can be all sorts of randomness that goes into how a performance is shaped over a small span. Like, those are all very good players who just didn't just had bad weeks at the wrong time, and that's just that's how the sport goes. It isn't like the great guys don't just keep being great all the time. There are ups and downs, and there are all sorts of fun little things that happen along the way that make it so special when you do have a winning season
on the Jays. But I'm going to bring you back on before the next Leafs playoff series. It's fine. It's just small sample sizes. This is the year. It might work.
I mean, I probably would say that. I honestly probably would say that.
And I honestly, as much as I say it tongue in cheek, that's what's keeping me around at this point. Let's not go down that road.
You'd like to see them get to the second round.
Once in a while, like, just to back up my faith. But yeah, let me ask you one more on the rotation, because I think when we saw them line up going into last weekend's series against the Brewers with Bieber, Gausman, and Scherzer, a lot of people jumped to the conclusion, perhaps unreasonably, that was as much about getting those guys lined up for the Yankees series this weekend. And it turned out that wasn't the case. Bieber went on Wednesday. Now, that will allow you to bring him back against the Astros next week, which, helps to, I don't want to say justify, maybe it was never unjustifiable, but was that your immediate impression as well when you saw the way they lined up going into the Milwaukee series, that it was as much about New York as it was about Milwaukee? And in that case, you were surprised to see that they didn't stick with that? Or when you look at the way this shook loose, did it always make sense to have Bieber go Cincinnati and then bring him back against Houston?
I mean, I am of the mind that, the price they paid for Bieber, the short amount of time that they have him, they really should get as much out of him as possible. And if they're comfortable with him going on,
and this is the difference between 7 starts versus 6 starts.
And
sometimes that's all that matters, man.
I think the more Bieber starts you get, the better. Even if you don't think about it, and though I'm sure the team to an extent does, in just like pure value terms, but Cal Steven is going to probably have a real big league career and pitch a bunch of innings. Like, he looks like a real kind of guy. To give that up for 4 or 5 starts versus 6, 7 starts, like, it's still the value proposition is you got to win.
Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing that trade in any respect at this point. Obviously, Bieber's looked great, except for a little wobble there on Wednesday night. But I think that when you pay that much, that's you're paying to get as much out of Bieber as you possibly can, and so that didn't bother me. I don't think that
Were you surprised though? Did you think, like the rest of us, it was to be in both the Yankee and the Brewer series?
It looked like it, sure. Yeah. I don't know that I was like incredibly surprised, just because I think it is about getting as much out of him, but. I kind of like disrespecting the Yankees in that way as well. I'm not saying like, we have to have our best against you to have a chance. It's like, I don't know. Look at how they've played against good teams lately. It's not been great for them. So
what if you made it the Bieber
feel like
move?
I'm too nonchalant sometimes about people get very upset about managerial decisions and roster decisions and all that stuff, and I'm always I'm upset.
I am a little surprised. That's all.
Sure. I'm just like, they probably had good reason for it. Sure. I don't know.
What have you made of Shane Bieber thus far? There was always talk coming off the surgery that a lot of guys come immediately back from it with a bump in velo, but struggled to find their control right away. That, in the first 2 out of 3 starts, sort of appeared to be a non-factor for him. He had a little bit of bump in velo back to where he had been when he was at his best, but he was still owning the zone. And as you mentioned there in that third start against Cincinnati, elite again, except for one inning that got away from him a little bit. And that can happen to anybody. Is this about what you expected from him, or, are you pleasantly surprised with what you've seen thus far? Where are you at on his first few starts?
I would say I'm pleasantly surprised. A lot of that, to refer to the podcast, my other podcast, podcast again, Nick has been very cautious about it and very much quick to say, the command is the last thing that comes back from Tommy John, and that is Bieber's calling card, obviously, as we've all very clearly seen. That's so important to, him being the elite pitcher that he is. And that made sense to me, even though we spoke about this on our last episode, even though he was certainly more cautious than I have been. And so I would still say I'm, pleasantly surprised, mildly surprised, but I'm not overly surprised. I really did feel like, you looked at what he was doing in the minors, you looked at, how he was dealing, you looked at how, where the pitches were going, how he was hitting his spots, what the numbers were, where the velocity was. And he did seem like he was the guy that we kind of saw in those two starts in the start of 2024, which sort of came after a couple years in the wilderness in terms of injuries. I think he had a shoulder thing in 2021. I always forget this timeline, and I've spoken about it a couple of times. But the shoulder thing really did seem to drop his velo, and then it did seem to come back. Like, he looked really, really good heading into 2024, and that's when the elbow ligament finally gave way, or they finally decided, no, we can't continue with this. It's not responding well enough between starts, or whatever the decision was, or whatever went into that, and that necessitated the Tommy John. But the velo was back to more like previous Bieber, which was more of a high strikeout guy, and he had great season in 2023 and 2022, but it was definitely not the high strikeouts that we saw when he won the Cy Young in 2020, for example. And he looked a little bit more like that. It was only a couple starts, but he looked more like that pitcher at the start of 2024, and then he's come back and sort of looked like that as well. So I thought that there was that possibility. Even though, there are all sorts of questions about how guys are going to recover from Tommy John. But to me, it's more, once you start seeing it, moving all in the right direction, then you can feel more confident. Like, he didn't have the Alek Manoah experience of coming back from TJ and
who's looked better of late, but there was some of those starts we were seeing as he was working his way back up were not encouraging.
No.
Yeah. Whereas Bieber almost from start to finish looked like linear recovery right where you wanted him to be, and stepped right into your rotation as a top of the line guy.
I think it's also important to remember, and I've mentioned this, whenever Nick and I have talked about it as well, is that, he's farther along. Like, he had earlier surgery.
That's right.
It was only a couple starts. He had a setback this May, where he went out and he pitched at least one, maybe two rehab starts, just to start the build up, and then felt something and was like, okay, no, this is, so shut it back down for a bit.
Yeah.
So he wasn't 12 months post Tommy John when the Jays acquired him. He was more like 15, which is they say it's like 12 to 18 months or whatever it is. So he was certainly getting more towards the finish line in terms of that recovery.
Sure.
I think it would have been a different proposition if he was literally just at 12 months, and maybe the Jays wouldn't have made that decision.
Right.
And maybe they would have looked right because he did have that setback. But, I think getting that much more additional time, to strengthen the arm and to get ready to really log big league innings, I think was probably very helpful, and also meaningful in terms of being able to buy in on what you were seeing in the minors.
Once again, the podcast the Stoeten is referring to with Nick Ashbourne is the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast. Now's a good time to go and subscribe to that one while you're listening here. And don't tune away. You can check that one out after this one, but make sure you get subscribed to it. It is, for my money, my favorite weekly Blue Jays podcast, the most insightful, and I kind of like the guys, so get subscribed to that.
No shade to Arden and Ben. We like
no, it's a good show too. I listen to that one as well. So you know what? Subscribe to everybody. Get out there. Get as much Blue Jays talk as you can, and then get on Twitter and speak your piece, for better or worse.
Just not in my replies.
That's right. Don't text. We should talk a little about the offense, I suppose. And look, George Springer is having, it warms my heart, an old guy season for the ages. And it just continues to happen. Is there anything that you have been able to take a look at in terms of the way he's approaching things. I know, in the aforementioned At the Letters podcast with Arden and Ben, Arden mentioned he constantly tries to get Springer on the record with what's changed this year. What are you doing differently? And he's not giving it up. He's not talking about it. Is there anything you're seeing that has changed, what was supposed to be the bad year in the contract into an, oh my God, all-time kind of season?
Yeah, it's been wild. I mean, it's just literally he's trying to lean into the power. I mean, I think that's what it is. And I don't know, I didn't read this myself, but I've heard it's been told to me, and I believe it, that he was just a little more contact oriented the last couple of years. If you look at some of his bat metrics, the launch angle last year was 9.4 on average, 9.4 degrees, fairly flat. Not Vlad, but more. Springer has. Was kind of like that guy at the start of his career, and it looked like he kind of went back to a flatter swing and focusing on being a leadoff guy and getting on base and doing those sorts of things. And this is just a much better spot for where he is in his career. And you see, you saw a similar thing when he turned 30 in Houston. The launch angle went way up, the home runs went way up. He was just sort of a different guy, and yeah, for some reason he went away from that. Later on in his Blue Jays career over the last, 2 previous years, to an extent, just because mostly I think that wasn't really working for him. Some people will tell you it was Don Mattingly hates home runs, so they decided to stop hitting home runs. But those are unserious people who really
need to go trim their sideburns.
Think a bit more holistically about how any of this works, about how much agency players have in their own careers, and how much what coaching really does, and who's actually on the field swinging the bat. All those things. It's it's odd, and also who was even the hitting coach at the time? It was a different guy. Anyway, end of rant. But yeah, you see that he's just really, tapped into that. And it turns out that he's just an incredibly naturally talented baseball player that sort of went away from what was, the ideal way for him to try to operate, I would say. I mean, there's certainly more nuance in it than that, but it really is, it just feels like, he's trying to put the ball in the air and hit it really hard. And that was not necessarily what he was doing. And you see he's getting, he's just getting better swings off. He's producing more barrels, more exit velocity, all that good stuff.
What is the ideal spot for him in your mind in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, if he's doing these things that he's doing and in the leadoff spot, that's fine. If he's not, too focused on, I got to get on base for guys. It feels like he's a guy who can drive in runs. I don't know that they have a great options in the leadoff spot. Anyway, I think as long as he stays true to this version of himself, he can hit anywhere in the lineup.
Sure.
I obviously near the top. I like that. He can. I'm not, as anyone who's heard me before will know, I'm not, an old school traditionalist.
No.
You need an RBI guy and that kind of stuff. But it does help to have, behind a Vlad who's going to be on base a ton, behind a Bo who's going to be on base a ton, guys like that. I don't know. I don't think the lineups have been super controversial over the last little while anyway.
And they are always, like, more than ever in history, more flexible, right? Like, it's who are we facing today, and how's this guy going? Like, we've been talking a ton about Barger. Does he need to be dropped out of the second spot? And when he is, then you bring him back, and he's sort of, it's flexible right now, maybe more than ever in history. I kind of like if he's willing to swing for power at leadoff, I'm fine with that. Like you said, don't be focused on getting on base. I also got no beef with him behind Bo and Vlad, who may be on base at the time, if you can find a more suitable leadoff spot, right? He's an interesting guy at 35 years old. When they signed this contract, this was supposed to be where you're like, just grit your teeth and get through it. And you hoped that the earlier seasons went better. And yet here we sit. This is maybe the best year of this contract. Yeah.
Now you're thinking, do they need to tack on an extra year somehow? I mean, we're probably not quite there yet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, though.
If he fell off a month ago, it would have still been a great season for him.
Well, and I was worried about that, man. After the concussion, you're like, don't be knocked out of this hot streak. And even right back, like right when he came off the concussion, somebody hit him right away on the arm or something. You're like, leave my boy alone, right? Like the old man needs to be let to sit in his rocking chair and do his thing here. I did want to ask you about Bo, because you and I have had this conversation. I'm sure you've had it with a number of people, that going into this season, it was almost impossible to envision an extension because he's coming off perhaps the worst year of his career, and he needs to rebuild himself up. And the Blue Jays, and how at that point do you establish, I think I'm one of the best players, best hitters in baseball, and you're looking at my last year and the injuries and everything that I've gone through. It was going to be tough to find a number. And this has now become both the best and worst case scenarios for the Blue Jays. You have gotten the Bo Bichette that we all know exists, and he is contributing to what this team has done this year, and yet the price tag has only gone up while he's done it. I'm not asking you to predict what's going to happen in the offseason, but as you've sort of watched what's played out this year, is there any part of you that looks back on the position that maybe you should have gone a little higher than you were comfortable with last winter to just get it done and risk it? Or what do we do now with the Bo situation?
I think it's the same path as you kind of would have expected all along, which is that, it looks like he's going to hit free agency. I mean, he certainly could theoretically sign,
Sure.
in the
this
interim
far.
between the playoffs and when free agency actually begins. But I doubt, he's going to want to see what the market is out there for him. And it has been a great scenario for him, obviously. The Jays, I think, showed with Vladdy that money is fake, and it doesn't necessarily matter. I don't know that he is such a big part of this team, and you do expect a guy like Springer to not do this in coming years, and he's not going to be around forever either. And there's not necessarily, a second cornerstone kind of guy coming in behind Bo. We love Alejandro Kirk for
Sure.
many reasons, but he's not going to drive your offense. And so, if Bo was playing for another team and was hitting free agency this year, and the Blue Jays had a Bo-sized hole in their infield, I think they'd be very interested in him, and I think that'll sort of just be the case this year as well. And as far as looking back, maybe I don't think Bo is ever going to take those the really team friendly, they call them, deals, early on in his career.
Doesn't appear to be very sentimental about it, right? He's a business guy. He knows what he's worth. And power to him.
But also push hasn't come to shove yet either, right? He talks about how much he loves playing for Vladdy, and he's he holds cards close to his chest, and we don't know necessarily, what that will mean. Will he be ready to go and go play for another organization if the Jays are in the ballpark in terms of what they're willing to offer him? Mm-hmm. So it could get interesting, but they could also just completely go another way. They do have Andres Jimenez there, who I think certainly could field shortstop, and they'll obviously not give you the kind of offensive production that you would like, but it does sort of make team building year to year, especially if you're a team that can play in free agency, a little bit easier if you have if you have a guy who's going to be there, who you're okay with the bat not being great, and then you can look at other positions that are more bat oriented, and fill in there with guys, maybe veteran guys on shorter contracts. That's the way that the team might be thinking, because Bo is certainly, a lot of people think that he should move over to second base. His there's the speed is real low. But he's also, you look at Trey Turner, who was a guy who had very similar numbers heading into his free agency, probably minus the weird blip that Bo had last season. Going in at a similar age, got $300 million. So, I don't know that Bo's going to get that kind of money. But a team that really wants to sell their offseason and wants to believe that he can be a shortstop, and that's fine. And kind of proving it this year. I mean, the Blue Jays do not seem to be hurt by the fact that he's their shortstop. They're still a very good defensive team. Though that's more of a first half than second half thing.
Around him,
guys around him are definitely the bigger part of that. But you can make it work, clearly. And he is a real good hitter. Those skills haven't eroded. It isn't that some people feared, okay, the bat speed, when all that, those metrics came out publicly, people were worried about, you always thought the Bo was going to fall off in terms of bat speed, or that was something that I think has been a concern of scouts, but you sort of saw that come out, and it was like, oh, the bat speed isn't really what we thought it was to begin with. But there is just some sort of absolute like natural talent in the way he's able to cover, the plate, and not just the plate, but outside the zone as well.
Majors and hits right now, I think.
He's a very, very good player, and he's got and I think the free agent case is going to be very interesting. I wouldn't be shocked at this point. I'll say this. I would be less shocked if he returned to the Blue Jays at this point than I would have been a year ago. It's going to cost a ton.
And it's based on nothing but vibes, right? Nothing but
100%.
Yeah, it's just I think they might get there, and he's going to go out. He's going to look around. He's going to find out what other people are willing to pay him, and come back. And I think, like Toronto, as you have shown, we're willing to pay. We're willing to, but you were going to have to show us this year, and he did. And so, yeah, go out, see what the consensus is, and I don't think it's a slam dunk, but
no,
I think it's no worse than 51%. He's back in Toronto next year.
And it's the only organization he's known, and I don't think he dislikes it here. I know there's been talk along the way, which has been a bit silly, I think, about trying to read the tea leaves or read Bob Nightingale's stupid, incorrect prose. But I think there's a real chance that happens. But also, if not, I think that they're not going to sit on their hands and just hope that whoever from the minors comes up and fills in that gap. Obviously, they have reason to believe in themselves, but you see people talking about the prospect hugging teens, for example. You see people like penciling in Art Nimala. Okay, he'll be there in a couple of years. So, and that process can take so much longer than I think. I don't think that's how teams think about it when it's you can't just pencil in a guy in
You're
a
just
ball.
chips. We'll see.
Right.
Right?
He'll get here when he gets here, but they have to put a team on the field immediately. And if Bo ends up blocking a good prospect, then there's an asset to use to fill another hole, which is sort of more the way that a modern team would look at it. So cheap talent in the minors, obviously, you do want to think about the path there, but I don't think at the moment giving Bo a bunch of years would hinder them in any way. I think it would be really fun. I think he likes playing with Vlad. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked.
Last thing for you here. I don't want to keep you too long, but you referenced there they have to put a team on the field. I want to talk just for a second about the people who put that team on the field. We are looking at the end of Mark Shapiro's contract. Ross Atkins has 1 year left. John Schneider also needs a new contract. I'm curious, have you seen enough now that you would be willing to do the John Schneider thing? Does Ross Atkins have to have his extension this winter? What happens if it's not Mark Shapiro? It appears he has a pretty good relationship with Rogers, but there's been speculation from different places, some more reputable than others, that maybe Shapiro would be ready for a different challenge, and maybe that's even trying to get in line to be next commissioner. If all three of them are going to be back, well, first of all, do you think all three will be back? And if so, what order would this have to happen in? Can Atkins re-sign Schneider before Shapiro has signed? Can Rogers re-sign Atkins before dealing with Shapiro? Like, how does this all shake loose here over the next couple of months? Because this is going to be a big offseason as well, and you need to know who's in charge. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. Like I was saying, I don't think it's just a mediocre team that had a hot streak. I mean, I think I've seen enough. I'm sure Mark Shapiro has seen enough to believe in this group going forward. Like he loves stability, and even though he's not under contract, I do expect that will get done. Just even if for no other reason, because he said, that there was, I forget which word he used, but he said that there was like mutual interest in that, which is something that he wouldn't say if there wasn't, some movement on that front.
Yeah, to me, that's entirely on him. I can't imagine Rogers doesn't want him back. I just wondered if he might have other, but you're right. He's not a guy who chooses his words willy-nilly. Like he said, mutual interest. So
yeah, I think that's pretty telling, because it would just be out of character for him to say that and there not actually be mutual interest. And I don't know that he's even, maybe he's looking to build some groundwork for if there is a split that he can look like the good guy. But I think that relationship's pretty strong, and that's been sort of a central point of how he's been successful and how he's been able to get Rodgers to spend to levels that nobody would ever have dreamed of,
right?
Before he arrived, or even halfway through his tenure. So I do think that happens. I mean, I don't. John Schneider gets hate, but I think that I don't think it's from above. I think I see this group completely coming back. I don't know that Ross gets an extension per se, probably because I think the lame duck questions would be weirder for him than Shapiro. But yeah, I mean, I think you can go ahead and not do that. But I just also think that as long as Shapiro's here and his valuing of stability and what we've seen this year and the way that he also, as he would be quick to point out, looks at a much bigger picture. I think people were ready for blood last year, but you could still point to some very good rosters that Atkins and his group have built. You can point to the turnaround in the farm system and a lot of the systems that they did. The way that the hitting is turned around and the way that they've sort of changed the way information flows. They've changed the hitting coach and brought in a couple of other guys there, and I think a lot of that has to be credited to ultimately to Ross and to the people he put in charge of that process. It's been a very, very good year for him, and I mean, I think people really like Schneider there. I don't see a change happening unless the bottom really falls out.
Well,
unless
this is
we
the other thing,
1987 this one.
Yeah.
Don't. You can cut that one out if you want, but because nobody needs to put that energy out into the world. Because I'm old enough to remember.
Sure.
But yeah, unless that happens, I think probably even at this point, if it doesn't, I think that this is.
The other question becomes the timing, and just. One last time, I guess, we'll tip the cap to At the Letters and Arden and Ben. Arden sort of brought up the idea that if you're going to do it, let's get to it. Because you're better off, like, the next time the Jays come home, announce that Shapiro's extended. And then there's one more homestand after that, announce that Schneider is extended. Instead of waiting for... Look, I think the last time I saw it, the Jays were at a 9% chance of winning the World Series, which was actually second best in the majors. It sounds low, but it's hard to win a World Series. Why wait until the 91% chance that you lose in the ALDS, ALCS, World Series, whatever? Wait till everyone's upset and then say, by the way, we're bringing people back, and ask them to remember what was an above expectation regular season. Do it now while everyone's feeling good. Everyone's happy. We're in first. These sorts of things. Do you buy into that at all, or would it matter to you whether it was done, while everyone's still feeling good, or wait until afterwards? And you know what I'm saying?
I do, and I know. I think that's a great point. I think that once the decision's made, you could just go ahead and do it.
Do it, yeah.
And it works. I mean, I think even if. I mean, what if they do win? What if that 9% chance does happen? Yep. Then people are upset if you don't have them
That's
signed,
right.
And you're like, what we got to bring these guys
they're
back.
all walking around with more leverage, right there.
Yeah, let's. I don't know how realistic that is. We know 9%, but also. I don't know that
you could extend Schneider
it can happen very quickly, as we saw in 2015. But I have a hard time believing that they're going to be kings of the city, even if they win a World Series. I think there's just so much built-in animosity with this group that it might be tough.
Yeah,
they don't have that Canadian card to play like that Anthopoulos and Paul Beeston did.
Yeah,
but also,
man, you win a championship.
I think it'll change it pretty well.
Masai Ujiri became a legend. Now, he was already reasonably popular. I don't know. You win a championship. Get over your previous... what?
I would think so, but we're seeing it creep out already, with the Schneider stuff that we see lately and how, the people have forgotten that 53 games or whatever, or their minds can get over that pretty quickly. But I'd love to see what happens. They should win the World Series, and then we'll see how people feel.
I agree. That should be the plan. We'll wrap it up here, Stoeten. I've kept you a long time, man. I always appreciate your time. What's coming up on the batflip.ca and the Blue Jays happy hour as we come down the stretch?
That's it, baby. Just talking about this team and try to avoid sometimes talking about the stupid bullpen. Hopefully, hopefully something that will change.
Great if it was less stupid here for the next few weeks.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would be nice if they did, build a bit more of a cushion back. If they go in and stomp the Yankees, that would be very fun. I think that would assuage a lot of nerves. Everybody would feel a little bit better, but that still won't make it not a grind and not nervy on the way in through September.
This is baseball. This is September baseball, and
it's going to be nuts. Yeah. It's get ready to be very angry, and then get ready to read my words about why that's wrong. All the way until it goes up in flames somewhere in October,
or not. 9% chance that
that's right.
That it all goes great. The Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast, as I said, right there at the top of the list of Blue Jays insightful talk that you should be checking out, and the batflip.ca. Stoeten putting out great stuff multiple times per week, most weeks. And
most weeks. Hey, long weekend threw me for a little.
100%, man, it happens. I thank you so much for your time, man. No doubt I'll come knocking again as the playoffs come down, or sit right in front of us. But always appreciate your time and appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, anytime, man. Absolutely.
There goes Stoeten. Always a fun conversation. Look, it's going to be a big weekend. The Yankees, right there on your heels. They have been for a while. The Red Sox kind of churning in and out. The two of them have been sort of swapping spaces, swapping spots in terms of who's right behind you. But both of them still right there. It's going to be a long month. This will be a big weekend. The Jays could put some serious distance between themselves and the Yankees, or they could let the Yankees be right there knocking on the door. All kinds of different directions for this to go. We'll be anxious to see what happens. As I mentioned off the top, Rob will be back on Monday for our usual drop to kick off the week, and we'll kind of break down what's happened throughout this weekend. And stick around. Dan Schulman coming up. Julian McKenzie is going to be back on the show. Lots of great stuff to come as we ramp up towards the NHL getting training camps underway, the Major League Baseball playoffs, the NFL is underway. It's an awesome time of year to be a sports fan, and we'll be talking about all of it right here on Tall Can Audio. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you're hearing me right now, following along on social media at Tall Can Audio. My name is Matt Robinson. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on Monday.
I've got nothing here. You're giving me baseball and hockey, and I got my keister blowing in the wind. That made to look like a fool here. That's just dumb. I don't want anything to do with this place. This place is run by a bunch of children.